Hey, everyone, it is Sleepy Reader. I am back with yet another comic book countdown, so I'm sticking to my schedule so far. I've got 9 books that I picked up from the comic book store on Wednesday, January 5th, which I guess is about 6 days ago now. And I'm going to do my subjective ranking of them from 9 down to my number 1 comic of the week. It was kind of a so-so week. I didn't have a bad time reading comics, but I wasn't wowed too much. My expectations, I guess, are crazy high in some senses. Anyway, let's get to my number 9 at the bottom of the list. Was this new comic called Monkey Meat. I had not heard of it previously. When I was chatting with Travis / Comics with Bueller, he mentioned some comic book with meat in the title, and then I saw it on the rack, and I really liked the look of the art and the color. But when I read it, it just seemed like some kind of anti-capitalist skit. I'm fine with an anti-capitalist story, as we'll see in some of these other stories. But, anti-corporate, you might say, evil corporation. But it just seemed like kind of if you looked at just the script end of things, it seemed like kind of an amateurish skit with some cheap jokes and stuff. And some stuff that it was hard to parse. There's definitely cool art. After I read it, I looked up the author, Juni Ba. He wrote, drew, and did everything else, apparently, here. And it turns out he is maybe the only professional comic artist from Senegal. So maybe if I came at this with the right context, I would have read it differently. But it is what it is. I read it without knowing anything about it, and I didn't get a lot out of it. Cool art there. So it says a thrilling new anthology. So I was thinking it's a different story every month. But the next issue, there's a page, next issue there, says a can of soul juice reveals his inner self, a hero or a monster. The streets of Monkey Meat Town are quite the den of scum and villainy, a problem young Harikut tends to solve. So it seems like it's going to be a continuation of the general setup and theme. Maybe there are different stories in the world of Monkey Meat, but it's this same world, and I don't think there's much chance I want to go back to it. Maybe his writing will get a lot better, but for now I don't think I'll be picking this up off the racks. Another one I picked up off the racks just out of curiosity, and partially it's an AWA Upshot book. I don't know if this is a variant. It looks like a variant cover. No, it's cover A. So it looks like a movie poster with credits down here, etc. It's called The Fourth Man. It's from AWA, as I said, and I thought I'd give it a shot. It was in fact, it says screenplay by Jeff McComsky and directed by Mike Deodato Jr. So it's art by Mike Deodato Jr., and I thought maybe I should give that a try. But it kind of reads like the first portion of a script by someone who wants to write a story similar to the Coen brothers movie Fargo. It's a murder with hitmen and used car dealers and some quirky police, I guess, or some police officers, one of whom is a woman who is working in the old boys club. So none of that felt terribly original. And then on top of it, Mike Deodato chose faces of well-known celebrities for most, if not all, of his characters. We have James M. Caan. We have what's this guy's name? It's now slipping past me. I know that name very well, and I can't think of who it is. Then we have Harvey Keitel, Anyway, I even wonder, I really, I was so distracted by this, I just spent most of my time thinking about how did Diodato do this art? Did he sort of find pictures of all these people's faces in the position he wanted and then kind of draw freehand from them? Or did he actually paste their faces onto various bodies and then just put them through some kind of computer process? I started to really suspect that he is using one of those poser programs for the bodies, because all the bodies have these slightly odd shoulders that lift up too high and look kind of puppet-like. So is Mike Diodato doing much drawing here? Maybe he drew those dogs racing there. They don't quite look like a photograph. But it seems like just, I don't know, it's very distracting. So this would probably be a perfectly fun read, but I think I would be just too It's not very original or anything like that, and it feels like a movie pitch. It feels like you're reading a illustrated movie script, but it still might be kind of fun, but not for me. I mean, I'm just too distracted by that art. And speaking of computer art, I know it's computer art in Hell Cop because this is the third issue, and I've pretty well ascertained that this artist uses various programs and poser type of things to let me see if I can find it. I mean, it looks like a whole bunch of puppets anyway, but a lot of avoidance of actually showing full bodies. Because I think that's where that poser thing, where people look the most fake, is when you see more of their bodies. And it does seem like this is not by Diodato, and they might be using a different poser kind of thing. But it does seem like there's always weirdness around the shoulders. Anyway, that's not important. I am still enjoying Hell Cop. It's kind of not a guilty pleasure, but similar to a guilty pleasure. Just kind of, I'm reading it for fun because I like goofy stories about hell. It does feel like the plotting is a little less tight on issue 3. I'd rank the Fourth Man at 8. This is number 7. At number 6, I'm putting One Star Squadron by Mark Russell and Steve Lieber and Dave Stewart. This DC spoof on superheroes, where all these lower level heroes from the DC's past now work at a temp agency, a sort of cheapo heroes for hire. Like, for instance, you might go on a security detail with some businessmen, or you might be at a birthday party, and it's all about humiliation and the office politics of kind of dead end jobs, and it's well done. I love the art of Steve Lieber for comedic stuff, but for me the tone was less comedy and more depression. It was just sad. It was just stories about pitiful characters, and I just had trouble getting into the humor of it. So I'm probably dropping it. I usually find with Mark Russell comics, because he's always doing dark satire of some sort or another, and often political, anti-capitalist to some extent. And there's always a thread of sadness running through it. And he always pulls out the ending. He always has very good endings, unlike most writers in comics. So I'm tempted to keep trying, but it just kind of makes me sad. Kind of reminds me of sometime in the early times of my last job, I realized, well, now I'm over 50, and if I lose this job or leave this job or this company goes out of business, which I often wondered how much longer my company could stay in business, maybe it'll be the last real job I have, and after that I'll be scrounging around because I've aged out. And it just reminded me of that kind of fear, and I just didn't enjoy being there. Luckily, I lucked out. My company lasted long enough, my investments coalesced, and I was able to retire. I used to think I might end up like being a taxi driver or something. At least that was the job I thought would be the most fun if I had to go out into maybe there's ageism in taxi driving too. It might have been hard to get a job there. In which case I would have been a greeter at Walmart. Okay. Then back to Mark Russell and anti-capitalist dark satire. We've got Not All Robots. It ends part 1, volume 1, with this issue 5. There's been the mix of comedy. There's been a robot rebellion of sorts, and then all the robots were replaced. I don't understand exactly how they ended the robot rebellion, but they've all been successfully replaced by robots that now look like humans, and some of our human characters have been kicked out of kind of the biosphere of the city and sent out into the wilderness. And I think because of The Fourth Man with Deodato art, this also has Mike Deodato art, I started looking more closely. The art here is more convincingly, at least somewhat, done by hand than in The Fourth Man. But I now was like noticing the shoulders on all the characters and looking suspiciously at their faces and looking at images where there's been an attempt to sort of meld photograph and drawing, but is it really almost all just photograph and poser stuff? So I think that two things. I am distracted by the art in this comic. Other people really like it and really like its combination with Mark Russell's dark satire. I would much rather see Steve Lieber drawing it, to tell you the truth. That would be more interesting to me. But also, I feel like Mark Russell's script is, it does some dark satire and then it seems not to be satire and just to be science fiction and survival and robots. And it feels like it's weaving back and forth in a way that doesn't work as well for me as it might have in some other Mark Russell books. Okay, so 2 Mark Russells, 2 Steve Deodatos this week. That's pretty amazing. Only 1 Colin Bunn. But this Basilisk, I'm putting at number 4. It's very good, very great art. The story is still exciting. I might drop this though. We have this group of people who hint at maybe being fallen angels, but I don't think so, or some group of magic-powered immortal characters, including the Basilisk, most of whom just happily go around slaughtering human beings wherever they go with absolutely... if they have any purpose or any point to their lives or any reason for being or any background, I haven't been able to get anything out of the first 6 issues to tell me, and I feel kind of frustrated about that. So it's a very good comic, except for that one sticking point. And at this point, I really want to know, why are they the way they are? Why do they act as if they have a purpose? Why do they think they're superior to humanity, etc.? I'm frustrated on that level. Also frustrating all of a sudden is 2 Moons. I put it at number 3. This book has a lot of goodwill with me. The previous issue made kind of a jump in time, possibly. It took a little more work to parse who was who, but it paid off, and it was a really good read. This one, there's various characters who are sort of out in the wilderness, out in the desert, trying to figure out who killed somebody. There are some kind of evil spirits who are driving some people around. I've started to lose the thread. Will the thread come back to me in the next issue? I hope so. It's just a little confusing. There's a bunch of, will it get lost in just a bunch of, this is Indian spirituality mumbo jumbo. You don't need to really understand what's happening or something like that. I don't know. That looks kind of photoshopped there too. I think it's just the style of the line art along with the coloring, but Anyway, this is such a good series so far. I like to think I'm wrong in my confusion. I do hope I find time, and I will go back and read issues 6 and 7 and then 8 again and see if it makes more sense for me. I've been having a little trouble finding enough time. I spent, actually, with Not All Robots, I had to read issues 3 and 4 to catch up with Dirtbag Rapture by Chris Sabella, Good and Contreras. I had to read 3 issues, and that took a lot of time. It's a very dense comic with a lot going on each page, a lot of back and forth between a variety of characters, many of whom are ghosts or demons or angels. Our character is constantly taking drugs. There's a lot of moments where someone is about to tell her something, and she says, well, I'm too busy right now, I got to go do this, and they don't get to tell her. And it feels like a long string of those things. So it starts getting, it's quite a bit of work to read this comic. And Chris Sabella writing style seems to do little hiccups in continuity a little bit here and there, so that you have to hurry up and catch up with him. Oh, it's the next day. Oh, she's at a bar. Oh, these are now humans, not ghosts that she's hanging out with. These are her old friends. It takes a while. But the payoff is pretty good. This is a pretty solid, pretty unusual take on a supernatural ghost story kind of thing. The main character, I guess that's why she's called the Dirtbag, is a constant stoner, constantly seeking another high, partially maybe because she sees ghosts. She can keep ghosts in her brain. She can create I forget what you call it, a memory palace in her brain. The ghost can go live inside the memory palace in her brain. She doesn't know exactly everything that's in the memory palace in her brain either. So it's not really a memory palace, but something like a memory palace in her brain. So there's lots of interesting twists and mysteries. Chris Sabella, the writer, has something really interesting going on here. I love the way the artist makes each character have their own unique look, and they're not, as you can see, your typical sort of Hollywood good lookers. The coloring at times gets too dark for me, and it's doesn't totally go with the cartooning. Then when we're kind of in the more ghostly world or inside her memory palace, the lighter coloring is a bit more appealing, but obviously you wouldn't want the reality to be colored as lightly as this. But I just have some troubles with. I don't know why I always feel like I have to complain about coloring, but it's something I do every time. So anyway, that was a pretty good number 2 issue, especially in this sort of so-so week. And then another comic, the final comic, number 1, is a very strong number 1. It might have been number 1 in other weeks or ranked quite high. It's Dark Knights of Steel. This is issue 3 of 12. I'm so glad there's 12 issues total, that we have many more issues to go, because it's just such a pleasure to keep exploring this sort of medieval fantasy world with a large cast of somewhat familiar DC characters in slightly different roles. I've heard somebody compare it to Game of Thrones, and there's a bit of that. I was thinking about how most of the heroes, even though they're based on DC heroes or DC characters, live in a gray area, what you would expect them to be like in a world of kings and small kingdoms, and the medieval kind of setting or fantasy kind of setting. So there aren't many good versus evil kind of vibes going on here. It's more like different groups of people with different motivations and such. Except maybe Princess Diana of the Amazons. Perhaps she is the closest to pure good we're going to get. But even she may have, motivations based more on loyalties than on justice and that sort of thing. Anyway, it looks like we're building up to a war between the kingdom of the Elves and the kingdom of Black Lightning, and we'll see what else develops. It's I don't know. It's just a really fun comic. So a really well done, really fun comic. That's, that makes your week, right? So that was good. There was one other comic I had, Ordinary Gods, which I realized I am like 5 issues behind on. So I couldn't even find all 5 issues to catch up and read them for this video. But hopefully I will find those and catch up. I actually thought that I had removed Ordinary Gods from my pull list. So I have to check on that. Maybe I don't even have all those issues. And it wasn't that I didn't like it, but it was kind of similar to Basilisk. It was another thing about gods among us, whose moral behavior is questionable. So anyway, it was fun enough week. It's kind of weird that that Dirtbag Rapture, my number 2 book, it was so hard getting through 3 issues of it. So I don't know if I'd want to read it in a trade. Although it might be hard to keep track of everything if I had read it monthly. I don't know. Are there some comics, do you get the feeling sometimes? I mean, I get this with books sometimes. They're a struggle to read, but when I'm finished them, I feel very rewarded. I don't know. We'll see if the rewards on Dirtbag Rapture are that great. But I like that it's so different from anything else I'm reading, for sure. Okay, well, I'll be back soon. I hope you're having a good week reading comics, and I'll talk to you later.